What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie2988 coming at you live once again to the power of the internet. I'm out on this beautiful March day here at the end of the month, exploring my hometown, and I thought it would be fun to show you the next chunk of my origin story. I'm sure you've seen parts 1 and 2, maybe even part 3 that was exclusive to Storyfire. Well, this is part 4. This is my life in Fayetteville, the apartments I lived in, the places I lived in, and some of the stories you may have never heard unless you are a devoted Boogie follower. So join me as I show you some of the nicer and some of the less nice places I've lived in as I worked my way up into the person I am today. So when I first came to Fayetteville, this was the house my brother was renting or buying. I'm not sure. I think maybe he owned it. But I stayed with him here for, I guess, about less than 6 months. And looking at this house, it's not as nice as I remember. It certainly is very nice on the inside. I do remember that. But it's a big house. And I just remembered thinking this was the lap of luxury. Like, who lives like this? Who has such an amazing place to live? And yeah, the place is definitely older now. But I think it's maybe not as nice as the place I'm in now. But it's still really, really nice. I mean, this was great. Now, my brother was married at the time and honestly not getting along very well with his wife. And it made it a very difficult living situation. And I hate to say that. I hate to talk crap about my brother or anything like that. But they ended up divorced. And me living here was definitely not making the situation any better. In fact, it was making it considerably worse. So one night, after a particularly toxic argument between him and his wife, I decided I wasn't going to do this to him anymore. I could find a place to go. I talked to my best friend, Chad. And I'm like, dude, what can we do? I don't care if I'm homeless. I don't care what happens. Help me get the hell out of here so I stop ruining their marriage. Their marriage was still ruined, but I'm not sure that it was my fault. But let me show you where I went after that. It was quite different from this place, I can tell you. That brought me to McCrary Hall, and I very distinctly remember my brother's ex-wife dropping me out in front of this place and going up into a dorm room. If I had to guess, it's right there on that middle floor, staying with Chad. And this is the period of my life where I refer to myself as homeless, and I'll tell you why. Because I did have this dorm room to stay in sometimes, but I couldn't always stay there because you needed a key card to get into the building, and I didn't have a key card that got me access to this building, and I wasn't supposed to be staying there anyway. So sometimes I would sleep in a TV lounge here at this dorm or a different dorm if I couldn't get into Chad's room. If I couldn't get into the dorm, I would sneak into a faculty building, a computer lab. I'd stay on the computers all night and just not sleep that night. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on a couch or a chair in those computer labs. I did whatever it took to stay warm, stay alive. And it took about 6 months of us working student jobs, saving up at $4.25 an hour before taxes, before they withheld any from taxes, buying and selling magic cards here and there where I could, and just saving up enough money to get our first apartment. Unfortunately, my friend Eric, who I met over a game of Magic, wanted to move into a place with me. He started scrimping and saving as well. We both got half of the first and last month's rent, half of the deposit, and we were able to rent a place, and I'll take you there now. So here we are at Sycamore Apartments, and I have to say, it is 100 times nicer than when I lived here. Goodness gracious. But this apartment right here on the bottom, this little 2-bedroom place, was the very first place we ended up after being homeless. And, you know, looking at it now, I mean, it's not a bad place. It's really not. I mean, they've definitely worked on it, cleaned it up, painted it. I hope it's nicer on the insides than it was. But honestly, we weren't doing too bad for ourselves. When we moved in there, we didn't have a stick of furniture. In fact, we borrowed chairs from the university so that we had something to sit on. I did rent a bed from the landlord, but a lot of people were sleeping on air mattresses that they got from Walmart. We slowly worked our way up from there, getting our first kitchen utensils, getting our first plates, which we may or may not have borrowed from the university as well, but buying as much stuff as we could afford. But honestly, we ended up getting kicked out of this place because me and my friend Eric moved into it. Then Chad moved into it soon after that. Then Danielle and Curtis, they moved into it, and Eric moved out. And then Captain moved into it for a little while. Basically, if we knew somebody who needed help, that was going to be in the situation we were in, if they were going to be homeless, we just let them move in, right? You can just live here for as long as you want. Well, eventually the landlord caught word of that and decided to almost double our rent so that we could pay for the extra people that were in the house. And some people were there for a week, some people were there for a month, but I don't blame her. But basically, instead of signing a new lease with almost twice the rent, we just packed up and moved in the middle of the night. I know a lot of you out there know exactly what that's like. Well, that's what we did. And we went somewhere arguably worse. We ended up in a basement apartment here because the landlord that was renting it did not care about your credit. He did not care about your rental history. He did not care about anything. He just wanted cash. And honestly, this place again looks really nice because they've renovated it since I lived in it. I know that for a fact because while I was living in it, they started renovating it. And that leads to one of the most disgusting stories of my life. Again, we're down in that basement apartment and they're renovating and it's noisy and miserable and just awful. And all I want to do is run my small business and play EverQuest and be left alone. So we talked to the landlord and we're like, look, we can't live like this. There's too much noise. There's too many construction workers. People are leaving the building. Can we break lease? And he's like, nope, if you break lease, you got 3 more months. You have to pay all 3 months. I'm like, dude, we're not going to do that. So one day they're working on the plumbing and our plumbing is just not working for like a day, which is bad enough. But then it began to rain sewage into our bathroom from the apartment above. I guess it had overflown. I guess maybe they had broken a pipe, but our tub and our floor was filled with sludge. Some of it coming up out of our tub, some of it also coming up out of our toilet, but a lot of it raining down from the ceiling. So we moved that next day. Like as soon as we could leave, we went, we rented a hotel, we talked to the landlord. I threatened to threaten him, I threatened to sue him for ruining our stuff, for ruining our towels, for ruining our lives. I told him I would not pay the rest of the lease, which he never held me to it, thankfully. But we went to the closest place, quite literally across the street, across the parking lot, I should say. There's no road, it's just a parking lot. But that was our next place after it literally rained feces on our heads. Oh, by the way, I'm in a parking lot. I shouldn't be using my phone, but yeah, this is exactly how I remember this parking lot. They may have renovated the outside of the building. They did not renovate the parking lot. Good. Here we are right next door at Mariah H. Apartments. In this apartment, right here, I'm sitting in my old parking spot, and that is the old apartment that I lived in. I don't know why I can't zoom in on it very well. But interesting history here. We lived here for a few years. It wasn't too bad. This is the place I was living when I got back into magic, when I got back into dating. I lived here with Chad, and again, we would take in strays whenever somebody needed a place to stay. Eventually, I started dating that girl I've talked about many times, the girl who was a feeder. She wanted Chad to move out so she could move in, and we agreed to do that. Of course, that didn't work, and then I was in this apartment alone, and I just kind of hated it. So I wanted the place a little more affordable. So I moved from here, but fortunately, I had a little bit of financials coming in. I was doing okay, and I could afford a different place. I thought I was moving up in the world, though. Turns out I wasn't. Let me show you. Fun fact about that place, though. That is where I started my YouTube channel. That is where I first started making YouTube videos. And my very first video, the promiscuous girl little dance, as well as the D&D videos, they were filmed there. And I was working at Gallery of Champions while I was living there. So honestly, that apartment has some of the best times of my life. Truly. I love that place. If I could ever afford an apartment complex, maybe I would buy this one. So this is Raspberry Place, and lived here during the bulk of the beginning of my YouTube videos. The Francis Gets Hacked video was here. A lot of good videos were filmed here. A lot of the early ones on that grainy camera with the terrible microphone. This place was not that bad. I mean, it was smaller and cheaper than the previous place, but it was also mouse infested. And I say mouse, not rat, because there is a field that belongs to the university behind this building. And inside this building, this is where all the mice would hang out when it started to get cold. So they would find your way into your apartment and they would basically infest the place. It was kind of disgusting. Not as bad as this other series of buildings that's owned by them right across the street here. This is, I think, Leverett Gardens. It is notoriously roach infested as well. So if you're living in Fayetteville, do not rent some of these places. Check and see if there's pests before you do. But that little lower apartment down there, I lived in right up until we moved into the duplex. And this was the place that me and my ex-wife lived for about 3 months before we decided we could afford and wanted to move into a duplex. So we did. True story though, up here in that apartment above mine, oh, let's see which one is it. Right at the top of those stairs, there was a woman that got actually killed by the police. She was being threatened by her boyfriend. God, because for legal reasons, I don't want to badmouth the police. This is just a work of fiction because this is how I remembered. I don't remember the details. You might be able to look it up if you really insist. But the woman that was living up there called the police for an emergency situation. Her boyfriend was threatening her life. And when the police showed up, the boyfriend was already in the room and already stabbing her, and apparently stabbed her multiple times. She was pregnant. So the cops tried to shoot the assailant and ended up shooting her as well instead. I don't really remember it, but it got ruled as a mercy killing. Apparently she had been stabbed so many times that she was going to bleed out anyway, so they thought, you know, at least that cop accidentally killing her saved her a lot of pain. But that happened while we were living here too. Yeah, now you get an idea why I wanted to move. Oh, that and the rats. So this is the duplex that I lived in when I filmed the Francis Xbox Rage and so many others, the Mountain Dew Rage. And it was this little duplex here, and we lived here, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure exactly how long, but that spot right there is where I broke that Xbox with the Guitar Hero controller. But this place kept exchanging hands from different landlord to different landlord to different landlord, and you never knew how much you were going to end up paying in rent. It just kept going up and up and up. And honestly, towards the end, it was almost $1,000 a month. My mortgage wasn't much more than that, so it only made sense to move. But a lot of really, really good memories in this place, including filming some of the best videos I ever made. So I still have friends who live in this neighborhood, and I often think about taking some of that YouTube money that turned into crypto money and buying some duplexes to rent out to college students. It seems like a nice area. It's really close to campus. My friends still like living here, and wouldn't it be cool to come figure out who owns this one and buy it from them and then own and rent out the place that I filmed all those videos in? And of course, I could still maybe, I don't know, film it occasionally, do retro throwbacks like we did when we borrowed my friend's house that's just down the street here that looks a lot like the one I was in. I don't know. Interesting though. So it might be one of my end goals. And this is my current home, and I've always been a little nervous about sharing it, but here's the thing. It's pretty much been publicly doxxed, so I may as well show it. This is the lovely home that I'm currently in. I keep thinking about selling it, moving into something smaller because I don't really need all the size, but I love the place. But I'm going to be honest with you, it definitely needs some maintenance. We need to trim those bushes, and we need to clean that driveway. Still though, quite a lovely place, and I'm very lucky to have it.